Hello everyone, Lily here. Welcome to my channel. For those returning viewers, welcome back. And this is a video response in part to Kim at Abundant Life Tarot and Mixtress Ray, who have both put out videos recently about the consumption of decks, of money spent on decks, and their thoughts on the subject, and if they could afford it or if they should afford it and all that stuff. And I'll be honest, there's not going to be a lot of tarot talk in this video. It's more I'm presenting a tool that I've used myself into determining if I should buy a deck. And that's beside the art. Like, what I'm looking at here is just a calculation of if your deck that you want is worth the effort you put in to earn the money to buy it, as well as what you give up when you go out and earn money. And it's something that we don't hear a lot talked about, even in the sphere of personal finance, which is unfortunate. It's mostly pick up any book on personal finance and they'll tell you, oh, put up a budget, put up a, calculate what you spend and then cut back, which is really great. I mean, it's great information if you don't know how to set up a budget and how to calculate and putting money aside. But it does very little in terms of addressing the sense of deprivation that comes when you decide you're not buying something for whatever reason, whether, especially if you can't afford it or you think you can't afford it, which had been my struggle for a very long time until I found this one tool. Although I'll be honest, this is not the only tool I've used into curbing spending and looking at my purchasing. But it is a good one, and it's a start if you want to start there. And this can go for any of your discretionary expenses. And it's looking at the money you bring in, what you have to put away in terms of paying your expenses, your living expenses, and what's left over at the end of the day to buy whatever you want or you feel like. And just because we want something doesn't mean it's a good use of our resources. There's a lot of expenses and a lot of there are expenses, but there's also things you give up when you work. So I'll go from here because it'll become clearer as I go into my presentation. So, and unfortunately it involves calculating what you spend. If you can, pull out your statements, your credit card statements, your bank statements, receipts, use your memory, look at your habits and come up, there's calculations. So the first thing I want to talk about is these are two exercises that includes looking at your income. And the exercise to make it easier is you use your take-home pay, which is what you get in your paycheck, which is your hourly rate multiplied by the number of hours minus your income tax, your social security, or in Canada what we call Canada pension plan, unemployment insurance, pension if you have a pension, if you're lucky enough. In the US, I think healthcare is an amount that is taken off at source, and any particular deduction that could be, particular to you or your organization or where you live. It could be like, I remember when I used to work, I used to have an optional disability insurance, since I have, like, my parents have been deceased, so I needed a source of income if anything happened to me. So that was one thing. And why make this calculation? Is, and I'm sorry, I'll just read it because it's just easier. So, while work can bring a sense of accomplishment and rewards, the number one reason for earning money is this one: to pay the bills and ensure our basic needs are met, and then some. That's pretty much it to start with. This is the reason we work, to pay our bills. Anything else is fluff. And that simple reason has been overshadowed over the years in importance by other concepts, such as working your passion and do the work you love, and the money will follow. And it has resulted in denigrating and devaluating lower skill work, which is still necessary, as we found out during the pandemic. Another outcome for anyone who happens to love their job and is working as their passion is the risk of being exploited above what they earn. Some people have said, if they love their job, what do you mean you can't work overtime? Don't you love your job? Which is basically saying, or could be interpreted as, well, you work overtime unpaid, or you're not going to have this job you love. But anyway, that's a little rant along the way. So, preliminary information, like I already mentioned, use your take-home pay. That's the money deposited into your account after all the deductions at source have been removed. So the amount I used in my example is $18 an hour times 81.1%. And, that's the number you're going to be plugging in your spreadsheet. The assumptions I also use is, the work week is 40 hours paid every 2 weeks. So, because I use two methods to show you, to calculate your hourly rate, which is basically what we're doing. So, the monthly calculation for method 1 is based on 4 weeks, i.e. 2 pay periods. And the yearly calculation, method 2, is based on 12 months, 52 weeks, 26 periods. So it includes a 2 weeks paid vacation, and the totals are different. So for method 1, I used, because it's a monthly calculation, it's 2,360 hours, while the yearly income was, the total was 30,363. Hours are calculated separately in the example used. So here's the table for method 1, which came from Gail Vaz-Oxlade, a Canadian personal finance expert, from her TV program called Princess. And this is the table with the monthly income and expenses. So you can read down the list. There's the monthly income, the loan, there's a loan repayment, there's rent, there's utilities, there's transportation, phone plan, groceries, healthcare, and then there's what's left at the end of the month, which is the number you want to get at, because that's the number you're going to calculate and divide by the number of hours that you've earned for the month. So in this case, it's $416 divided by 160, which gives you $2.60 per hour. And that's the amount that's devoted to your fun stuff. It's after all your bills are paid. So using this method, if $2.60 is what you can afford for fun stuff for 1 hour that you work for, if you buy a deck that's $50, that means you have to work 19 hours to pay for it. Now think about that. 19 hours is practically half of a work week that you're devoting to buying a tarot deck. Method 2 is a little bit more complicated, and the source for this method comes from the book Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robbins. It requires a little bit more information, but it also provides a clear picture of what's involved in terms of time and expenses devoted to you working. It goes beyond calculating the hourly rate based on a paycheck divided by hours spent at work. So, the information is based on 1 year, like I mentioned before. It assumes that expenses like rent or mortgage would remain the same if you weren't working up to a point. It also takes into account expenses that people don't think about in terms of the real costs associated with work. These costs bring down your return on investments, for lack of a better term, on working for a living. Said differently, if you didn't have to work, these costs would probably disappear. Obvious costs include transportation and daycare that you have to spend to go to work, takeout at work, clothing to fit your work culture, training costs to keep current in your profession. Non-obvious costs are takeout meals for home for lack of time or stress, mental health services to deal with the stress of working, services like house cleaning and landscaping due to lack of time, expensive vacations as a reward for working all year, upgraded vehicle to keep up with work position status. So these are just examples, but you can come up with a lot more. So if you look at the spreadsheet here, I did the same thing, and I added things that I thought were relevant or that I could think of as an example. And the costs associated with working added for the year, out of the $30,000 that someone earned, $9,400 was devoted to these extra expenses or expenses related to work. So when you do the calculation, you take your after-tax income, which in this example is $30,363, minus the cost associated with working, which is $9,440, you end up with what I call your real income, which is $20,923. And then the step 3 is basically the same sort of calculation we did before. We take the real income divided by yearly hours. In this case, it was 20,923 divided by 2,530 hours equals $8 an hour. And then we calculate, and this is the baseline, the $8 an hour is what you use to calculate anything you buy, and this to decide if it's worth your investment. So again, I'm using a deck that's $50. The hourly rate is $8 an hour. The number of hours worked to pay for that deck is 6.3 hours. So this is where you ask yourself the question, is the deck worth it? Or is that expense worth it? How many hours do you spend working to pay for that deck? So method 1 was 19 hours, which was half a week. Method 2, which was spread out over the year, although, like it was 6.2 hours, which is still 3/4 of a day. If you consider that you're working 5 days a week, well, there's, 1 day paying for a deck. Is this exchange worthwhile? There's no wrong answer here, unless you're in debt and this purchase is detrimental to other financial goals you have. These goals could include anything from working less hours or for less pay for an organization that's closer to your values, paying down debt, saving to, have an emergency fund or retire early or start your own business, or, when I started down this path way back when, it was really to have a fuck you fun. Pardon my French. There's nothing like having money in the bank to secure, the day until, if you're in a job you don't like. Anyway, with all the ramifications, having a fuck you fund is priceless in the sense that you can't be that manipulated at work and exploited when you have an option to leave. So that's all the calculations that I wanted to address. But you can also try and analyze, what is it about wanting a deck, or if you need a deck. The first reason is, why do you want this deck? And I'll be the first to say, because I need it. It's anyway, I'm not going to go down and talk about that rabbit hole of, seeing a deck and wanting it and all that stuff, because like everybody else, I fall prey to that. But, when it comes down to it, when we work with Tao, we just need one deck. Anything else is, we can get into the seasons and all that stuff. But, honestly, the more you work with one deck, you can work anytime with it. Anything else is, apart from one deck, is considered outside our needs. Like, let's be honest here. Pay attention to the conditions that surrounds you wanting this deck at this time. Is it your emotional state? Like, what is it at the time? Are you bored? Having the blues? Having nothing to do? You want a distraction from a boring task you're doing, so you go on Amazon or you go and watch YouTube. A big one for me is fear of missing out. We get all these Kickstarters that are limited in time, may never be reprinted, all that jazz. Another one is bragging rights and wanting to belong. That was another one. That used to be a big one for me with another one of my hobbies is everyone, a new product would come out, everybody would talk about it, and I'd buy it just because I wanted to be able to talk to like-minded people about the same thing. Satisfying your fantasy self. When it comes to decks, that has been my rabbit hole, where I see someone, I can't pinpoint one right now, but let's say, someone is talking about shadow work and they want you to know, oh, they've got this deck, and isn't a popular one these days the Reclaim Oracle, where if you're walking the self-worth path, or you're doing shadow work, this would be a great deck to have. You know, there's that. There's somebody talking about their experience with a certain deck, and it's like, that's another one where you're thinking, yeah, I think I might want to start that, you know, so you go out and buy the deck. I mean, you know, take your pick. It could be ancestor work, it could be shadow work, it could be, again, you know, having a deck that matches the season, all that stuff. And a point I want to make as well, marketing works. You know, let's be cognizant of how we're being manipulated into wanting and buying a deck, and who benefits in the long run. Influencers and pseudo reviews. How did the video creator get the deck? Did they purchase it, or was it provided in exchange for a review? It makes a difference, I think. If the deck was provided, no matter what the reviewer says, those reviews are rarely impartial or objective. Take them for what they are, advertising. Like, I've seen too many reviews where nothing is negative about what's being said. And, well, I'll leave it at that, because I actually have really strong opinions on this. And I find it's doing a disservice to your audience to only say positive stuff when, you know. And I've been noticing even, you know, there's a few, anyway, I'll leave it at that. If the deck was purchased, be aware that most amateur reviewers are reluctant to say anything bad about a deck. So a review may be positive and at worst neutral. This phenomenon has actually been studied and well documented and well known since the rise of the internet put professional reviewers out of work. So, you know, this is something to pay attention to. And when you're looking at a review, read between the lines. And I've actually heard one person who gets a lot of decks actually say that she'll never say anything negative because she doesn't want to hurt the creator's feelings. So, you know, take it for what it is. So the last point I want to talk about when it comes to advertising and marketing, or, you know, like actually watch for being manipulated into a scarcity mindset about a deck. Indigo and Kickstarter campaigns and their time limits are, I mean, really, they're just there to create FOMO. You know, I know there's a time limit and all that stuff. Like, I know there are reasons behind it. But let's be honest and say also that it's to create, oh my God, I need to get on this campaign or I'll lose out. So, however, a good business person, and that creators are not stupid either, they'll make sure to have enough money to, or, you know, their campaign will include extra funds to have extras so that they can keep selling the deck. And so, you know, like those Kickstarter campaigns are also set up to see if they're going to be successful to start with. And if they're going to be successful, well, you know, there's the marketing data to reprint it again, to have it reprinted again. Whether, you know, like some actually just went ahead and used their own money to reprint, and others just restart Kickstarter campaigns, which they know will be successful if they were successful the first time. So, you know, there's that. Limited print runs and special editions are also, you know, set up to create a scarcity mindset. Popularity of out-of-print decks. Why are they out of print in the first place? if they're mass market decks, they often fell out of print because they didn't sell well to start with. So, you know, I was around in the days of the Victoria Regina deck that came out, you know, that's worth, why, you know, that you can buy now for $200 because it's out of print. It wasn't, I mean, it didn't do well. That's why it went out of print so quickly. So anyway, newfound popularity and rise in price on the secondary market will bring back a deck into production if it's become so popular. And an example of this was the Fallen Angels Oracle. In the first print runs, I don't think that the stores could get rid of it. And that's why it went out of print. And then somebody decided, or somebody saw it on a video, and you know, it became a feeding frenzy. So you have to ask yourself, you know, like, why is an out of print deck popular now? So these are my thoughts on the subject. Let me know if this is useful. I just want to add again that this is one tool that's worked out well for me. But if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I highly recommend you read the book, Your Money or Your Life, because it's got other exercises in there that makes you look at your money and if whatever you're buying or spending your money on is worth it. So I know it made a big difference in my life. And just one caveat though with that book is some of the exercises, you have to do them for months. And like me, for myself, it took 6 months before some of the exercises took. But by then, I had increased my savings rate by 20%, which is not, I mean, it's not inconsiderable. So that's all are my thoughts on the subject, and I hope this is useful. I'd appreciate comments on this because I was really debating on presenting this. It can be a dry subject. It's not dry for me, but you know. And if anybody's interested in other tips or something else, anyway, feel free and let me know. And I'll leave us here until next time. Have a good day.